The Rota Mundi Tarot, The Rosicrucian Arcanum by Daniel E. Loeb. Now, I'm going to read the end of a chapter called Tarot Myths and Superstitions, and it explains a lot. So here we go, and excuse me if I pronounce any names wrong or any words. Tarot Myths and Superstitions. This section is provided at the end of the chapter because it is more productive to focus on what the tarot is than to focus on what it is not. Since the tarot has been somewhat shrouded in secrecy, there is understandably a great deal of misinformation associated with it. There are myths and misunderstandings, both among tarot readers and tarot opponents. Such superstitions stem from a lack of understanding of its history, ignorance regarding the process, or the person being taught erroneous information regarding it. Although the tarot originated as a card game played within Christian societies and later expanded into the realm of mysticism by Eliphas Levi, a Catholic priest, Protestant deacon, and Rosicrucian, Christian mystics. The most outspoken opponents of the tarot are members of mainstream Christian churches. Tarot readers who come from a Christian background will sometimes be confused regarding the acceptability of utilizing tarot cards. This is because many churches will install in their members that the tarot is satanic witchcraft that can open up a portal to evil and demonic possession. Such superstitions are reinforced by fictional movies and television shows. So, before even beginning to examine the subject, parishioners are filled with fear, bias, and prejudice against it. Such attitudes are the very reason the tarot was an occult practice in the first place. The practice was hidden, occult, because there has always been a self-righteous brood of vipers, Matthew 3:7, waiting to persecute anyone who disagrees with them, Matthew 27:22-23. If the mainstream church is part of the Church of the Beast, Revelations 13:11, or the synagogue of Satan, Revelations 2:9, then you are better off without their approval, Matthew 5:11-12, 10-22, and John 15:19. Debating with such people is usually pointless because you can't show Debating with such people is usually pointless because you can't show something to a blind person or cause a deaf person to hear your point of view. Matthew 13:14. If you cast your pearls to swine, they will most likely turn on you and attack you. Matthew 7:6. However, if there is someone you don't wish to ignore, such as a friend or family member, and you wish to try to explain the tarot to them, you might start off by pointing out that Christians are given more liberty to engage in activities than the Jews in the Old Testament were afforded. Tarot cards would fall under the topic of Christian liberty, and the only sin would be doing something contrary to one's own conscience. Romans 14:23. Its acceptability would be related to weaker brethren being unnecessarily offended by people eating meats sacrificed to idols. 1 Corinthians 8:1-7. The tarot is not mentioned in the Old Testament, and whatever it was that the Canaanites were engaging in, Deuteronomy 18:9 and Leviticus 19:31, it did not include the tarot. Did you hear that? It did not include the tarot. The sin the Israelites were warned against had to do with committing adultery against God. Leviticus 26. They were not to imitate the other nations and sacrifice their children to idols. Deuteronomy 18:10. The Canaanite diviners were necromancers who consulted familiar spirits. They obtained their information from the spirits of the dead and from demons, which is in complete contrast to the high priest of Israel, who used the Urim and Thummim to consult the Shekinah, Spirit of God, Leviticus 8:8. And that's the breastplate of the high priestess. Urim and Thummim. Okay. Tarot cards are not Ouija boards, and tarot readers do not communicate with demons or ghosts when they are interpreting the images on randomly selected cards. The closest biblical practice to the tarot would be dream interpretation, which played an important role in the Old Testament. Joseph was a dream interpreter, Genesis 48. And he also had a cup that he used for divination, Genesis 44:5. After Joseph was sold into slavery, falsely accused of a crime, and locked up in prison, he interpreted the dreams of the other prisoners, which is what got him released from prison and appointed into a position of power in Egypt. Joseph then stockpiled food on the basis of his prediction, Genesis 41:30, which is what saved the 12 tribes of Israel. Had Joseph not practiced divination, Genesis 44:15, by interpreting symbolism from dreams, he would have died in prison, and the 12 tribes of Israel would have died during the famine. There would be no Jews, Christians, or Bible in modern times. If Joseph did not interpret symbolism and predict what might occur in the future. Daniel was also a dream interpreter and was appointed the leader of the soothsayers and magicians in Babylon. Daniel 5:11. And the apostles cast lots to select Matthias as the replacement for Judas, Acts 1:26. The Hebrew people in the Old Testament were told not to engage in the spiritual practices of their neighboring nations, Leviticus 19:26-31. But that rule was not restated in the New Testament as applying to the New Covenant believers. The intention of the verses in Leviticus was to prevent the Hebrews from turning away from God. Yeshua expected people to use their discernment and deductive reasoning, Matthew 16:2-3, Colossians 1:9. The use of tarot cards was not a divinatory practice outlawed in Leviticus. Tarot cards and palmistry are fairly recent inventions, which were created 1,000 years after the New Testament was finalized, and were not techniques practiced during the time of Moses. Eliphas Levi, though, thought that tarot was a modern replacement. Levi thought that tarot was a modern replacement for the Urim and Thummim, and that the suits of the tarot were representations of the items contained within the Ark of the Covenant. When Yeshua died on the cross, the veil of the temple was torn in two, giving all believers access to the holiest of holies. The Shekinah no longer dwelt behind the veil, but lived within the individual believer, who became the temple of the Holy Spirit. 1 Corinthians 3:16. New covenant believers do not need a high priest to use the Urim and Thummim. I'm trying to learn how to say that, on their behalf, because they are royal priesthood who are directly led by the Shekinah. Romans 8:14, Matthew 4:1. Those who are guided by the Spirit are not subject to the previous laws. Galatians 5:18, because God's law is written in their hearts. 2 Corinthians 3:3, and the Spirit leads them through their conscience. Romans 2:15, 9:1. When reading tarot cards, it is not necessary to converse with demons, spirits, ghosts, ancestors, angels, or saints. Tarot cards operate by using one's personal intuition and combining one's conscious and subconscious efforts to brainstorm solutions to questions. The practice does not have to involve anything supernatural. If a tarot reader has undergone the chemical wedding, then the only spirit he or she might communicate with during a reading would be the Ruach HaKodesh. That's the Holy Spirit that dwells within them. If the Spirit of truth is living within the reader, then it would be foolish to attempt to contact any other lesser entity. Although the Shekinah dwells within those who have engaged in the chemical wedding, that does not mean that when conducting a tarot reading on behalf of a client that the reader will receive answers directly from the Spirit of God, especially not as a means of obtaining profit, money. Did you hear that? Especially not as a means of obtaining profit. Tarot reading on behalf of a client that obtaining profit. Okay, yeah. Let me read this all over again here. That does not mean that when conducting a tarot reading on behalf of a client, that the reader will receive answers directly from the Spirit of God, especially not as a means of obtaining profit. Okay? Okay. The Holy Spirit does not need to be consulted with cards because she is constantly at work within the individual. The purpose of the great work is for the person to learn discernment and grow in wisdom. So the initiate is given opportunities, such as when conducting tarot readings, to demonstrate wisdom and aid their neighbor. Matthew 25:36. Leviticus 19:18. There may be times when the providence of God influences the reader's perception in order to convey a specific message, but it is unlikely that the reader will be able to separate such messages from one's own intuition. After all, the point of the chemical wedding is for them to think similarly and be one. 2 Corinthians 13:11 and John 17:23. In addition to misconceptions of tarot opponents, there are also many superstitions that are prevalent among tarot practitioners. These might stem from beginning tarot readers being given bad information or taught erroneous histories, or they may have been misled by online courses, associations, or charlatans. Some readers start out as children playing with Ouija boards, and when they grow up, they take up the tarot without any further guidance. They might accept the superstitions expressed by popular culture and then perpetuate myths regarding the tarot. Some people are led to believe that tarot cards cannot be purchased, and that they must wait for someone to gift a deck to them before they can start learning the tarot. There are some practitioners who think that their cards are magical, that the cards know the future, place themselves in the order to be read, and convey exactly what will happen in the futures. Others believe a similar notion, but credit spiritual entities for ordering the cards and revealing the future. Some readers think their cards can get contaminated by the energy of people around them and must be regularly cleansed. Others think their cards are alive and that their cards can get mad at them and will refuse to work with them until the reader makes amends with their cards. There are also some people who think they are communicating with the ghosts of dead relatives, spirit guides, or angels. Even if such people express different beliefs than you, it is important to remember that those who are not against you are for you. Luke 9:50, which is in direct contrast to the opponents of the tarot, Matthew 12:30. The tarot was originally a card game played in Christian societies, but it has since evolved and is now utilized by people all over the world and from every religion and belief system. Like mysticism, tarot reading is an individualized practice, and every reader will tailor their techniques to discover what works best for them. It is important to tolerate the view of others, Romans 4:14, and to recognize that everyone must embark on their own unique spiritual journeys, Philippians 2:12. Not everyone is meant to understand the same things, Mark 4:33. Each person is given a unique purpose, 1 Corinthians 12:4-7, and everyone progresses at a different pace in their spiritual walks. 2 Timothy 2:25. Through variance and diversity, people are encouraged to explore their spiritualities and to seek the truth. But through dominance, self-righteousness, intolerance, and persecution, spiritual development is suppressed. Christian Rosicrucians and a few others were taken to a floor of the tower that the others did not even know existed. But they did not gloat their understanding over the others. They did not act superior to them, and they did not correct those on the seventh floor for not seeing the same things at the same time as them. Giving enough time and opportunity, misconnections and errors can be realized, and crooked paths can be made straight. The chemical wedding is a personal one, and each person must solve it coagula in order to make use of what is good, while disregarding the folly. As you engage in the great work at your own pace, allow others to do the same. I think that was that was so good. Like it really explains a lot. I could not explain it that way ever. Like, oh my God. So I wanted to read that, and I'm sorry if I messed up. I'm not the best reader. But I think people need to hear that, especially people who are Christians and, are a little curious or, maybe think that they're doing something wrong because, they're using tarot cards. So I think that explains a lot, and I'm going to go. I love you. Have a good day.